and today's topic is transition years, the big college move. And I'm here with Brie Jeweler-Bentz, who we're thrilled to have. Thank you for coming, Brie.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Excellent. Brie is a certified college placement counselor. She's a former member of the University of Michigan Board of Admissions. So we're thrilled to have her. She has a lot of knowledge on the transition between high school and college. She's worked with tons of students and parents on this issue. And so we're glad to have her along, and we're thrilled to have her. So my name is Colin Lynch. I'm a tutor placement coordinator at Educational Connections. And I also, if you've ever read our blog, I do the writing for the blog. And I help out. I'm Anne's personal assistant, and I help out with other things. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully it'll be a useful and informative session. So we'll explain to you how this webinar works, and at the very end we'll open it up to question and answer. So we'll try to go for 30 or so minutes, and then after that we'll open it to question and answer. And thank you all for coming. All right. So you'll notice the software for GoToWebinar. The orange arrow maximizes and minimizes the options and sort of a taskbar. You don't have to worry about any of that. And so hopefully you can see my screen if everything's going smoothly. And so if you ever need to minimize it, just click on the orange arrow. So everyone who's in the audience will be muted. Hopefully you can hear us, obviously. But at the very end, you'll be able to type questions into the question box, and we'll try to take questions at the end. So thank you all for coming, and you can type in a question if anything's broken or of that nature. But without further ado, we'll jump into the material. So here's what we'll cover today. We'll talk about structural changes for high schoolers going into college, what to expect, how it's different from what they've experienced in high school and middle school, academic challenges and new responsibilities that they'll have to incorporate into their lives, the social life and what to expect from that aspect. We'll get into parent advice and what you should do as a parent. And then lastly, sort of a theme throughout the webinar will be know your child and how to tell how they'll do once they're independent and on their own, what you need to prepare them for, and how to keep sort of an open communication with them leading up to it. So let's get into it, and we'll start with structural changes. So Brie, we'll see that this is probably the biggest change, wouldn't you say, for students going from high school to college as opposed to going from middle school to high school or any other leap forward that they have in their academic career. What would you say about that?
Yeah, no, definitely. It's a very different environment. They're going to be on their own for a lot of the experience, and whereas before they've had their parents there, they've had teachers close with them who've known who they are. They've received a lot of guidance and support, and now they're faced with a great deal of independence. And classes are different formats, and they have a lot of flexibility in terms of when they can schedule their classes and how often their classes meet. It's not your typical 7 periods a day for 50 minutes and 30 people in a class. I mean, they could have a huge 400-person lecture hall. They could have a small seminar. They, might have a syllabus where they have to kind of map out the entire semester at once. So it can be kind of jarring. It's not what they're used to.
Exactly. This is a big change. And so they'll be completely in charge of their own schedule, whereas in high school they may have had one elective or 2 electives to choose from. Every class will essentially be an elective. Depending on where they go to school, there might be requirements for which classes to take in their major and that sort of thing. But overall, they're in charge of their own schedule. And so if they don't want to have any classes before 11 a.m. or they want to squeeze all their classes onto Tuesday and Thursday, they can do it. So with this new freedom, a lot of students don't know how to handle it at first. A lot of them choose to sleep in, we find, but it's a big change, and they'll have no parents around to sort of give them initiative and force certain behavior. And so they'll have to wake themselves up, take care of daily maintenance and that kind of thing, and they'll create their own routine through it. And so, do you have any tips in general for what to do leading up to being prepared to do your own routine and being in charge and being responsible for everything that you have to do in college?
Absolutely, and before I get to that, let me just say really quickly that
Sure.
One of the things that colleges do try to do, especially at an orientation, for example, is kind of give the rundown on how this is all going to work and how classes are structured and what students need to be doing in terms of what classes they should be taking. They'll all have advisors that they can talk to about, if they know what they want to major in, kind of what classes to take, and if they don't, what classes to take. So there are people there to help them. I don't want parents to think, we just throw these kids to the wolves and they're totally on their own.
Exactly.
Because that's not true. But they do have a level of, flexibility and independence in terms of creating their own schedule. And I would say one of the most important things for parents to do at this stage while they're in high school is to start kind of like baby steps and being proactive and start encouraging their kids to become more independent. And parents, know their kids. If they've got a kid who's super responsible and gets themselves up and gets their work done and they don't procrastinate, and they're not going to really have to worry too much about how they're going to do in college because they're likely going to be prepared. But if they have a son or daughter who, they have to drag them out of bed in the morning and they have to really stay on top of them in terms of making sure they get homework done and stuff like that, they should be encouraging their kids now to really take ownership of their own education and really, wake themselves up in the morning, get themselves dressed, make sure they get their homework done and done ahead of time, and just, kind of empower them to become more independent now so it's not such a jarring thing once they become a freshman.
Exactly, and colleges know that freshmen are going to come in, sort of not knowing what they're doing. So orientation is all built towards preparing them for that. So it's not like it's going from 0 to 60 entirely. The college has a lot of support structures in place, and they know what every student is going through. Good. All right, so that's some of the structural changes you'll encounter. Big change from high school, obviously, with all the freedom. So there will be changes in the classroom as well. So it really depends on what school they end up choosing. Every school is a little different depending on the environment, whether all classes are small or you'll have some large lecture classes. If they're going to a sort of a large state university, in general, a lot of the intro classes will be larger, 300 plus students in large lecture halls, depending on, what kind of class they're trying to take. And for some students, that's sort of, it's new for sure. Some actually like the idea of being able to blend in when they feel like it, but most are used to more personal attention in class and being called on and taking attendance. You won't find any of that, at least for the first year of college. Now, as students get deeper into their major, they'll get into smaller seminar classes where they have 10 or so students and they're able to talk and discuss issues. But at first, it's really a new environment, especially if a student's coming from a smaller high school or isn't used to this sort of environment. So there's some other changes here as far as differences from high school. The school year is shorter, and so you'll see your students start to enjoy this, especially around Christmas and around May. The graduation is recently for a lot of schools. And so the school year is shorter, but a lot is expected of them. So a lot is packed into the shorter semester. And the classes in general are just sort of different. So any advice or anything you'd like to add to how the classroom experience will change for students from high school going into college?
Well, again, I think you pointed out schools are different from each other. You've got your large state universities, like you said, for example, and then you've got some really small liberal arts colleges that can often be smaller than a student's own high school. And it's a very, very different learning environment. And there are some students who can thrive in large classes. They are students who can take the initiative and go see the professors during their office hours. Every professor makes him or herself available to students. It's just whether or not the student can take the initiative to go. Sometimes you have to wait in line to see a professor. And for those students who really, run the risk of falling through the cracks, who don't take the initiative, who maybe wouldn't seek help if they need it, maybe a smaller classroom environment is what they need. And so a smaller kind of liberal arts school might be better for them, where they're going to be in classes as freshmen across the board with, 15 to 30 students. So I think, again, you have to kind of know your kid and know they might want a big social rah-rah school, but academically they really might be better in a smaller environment. And so you kind of have to have a sense of who they are and what, the appropriate environment is for them. And you know what, Colin, remind me what you asked me, because I think I just totally went off on a tangent.
No, I think, you touched on a lot of what I was asking about. And so I would say for sure, try to pay attention to how your student learns. What sort of environment are they comfortable in? Do they tend to study alone or in groups? Are they active in class? Do they like a lot of attention? This can give you a lot of hints about what school might be a good fit and where it would be the best environment for them to learn. So
yeah, no, definitely, and making sure, even now, teaching them while they're in high school. I can't tell you how many students I work with where it's like shocking to them that they could actually approach their teacher and ask for some extra help.
Yeah, exactly.
Or to find out, is there a study guide for this? Or, I'm kind of confused about what's going to be on the exam. Can you help me? A lot of students just, it wouldn't occur to them to do that, or they're embarrassed, or they don't feel like they, should be doing that. And those are strategies, those are life skills, really. And it's never too early to start empowering your kids to do that now, because in college, again, particularly if they're going to be in larger classes, they really need those skills. They're going to need to be able to ask for help when they need it, And that's all stuff that parents can help their kids with now.
Exactly.
Self-advocacy is a very, very important thing. It's critical to be successful in college.
Exactly. And so one thing that you'll see students encounter in college that they're not used to in high school is office hours. So usually when the syllabus is handed out at the beginning of the year, the professor will say, come to my office during these hours if you'd like to speak. And especially depending on your major, if it's a subjective class where the professor's grading a lot of papers or the TAs are grading papers, putting in some face time really helps your grade. And it helps you study and it helps you know what to prepare for and what to expect. And later down the line, especially in your major, developing relationships with professors really pays off, not just with your grades, but down the line they can help you with summer internships, with lab work. They'll write you recommendations for grad school. And so it's never a bad thing to encourage your kid to talk to teachers and talk to professors because that's what they're there for. And a lot of them love it and want to be there and are happy to help students. So good. So
Absolutely.
far, so good.
And another big issue that I'm sure parents listening can attest to is that, kids often will procrastinate. They really will. Mm-hmm. And it's can be much easier to sort of get away with that in high school. High school is often structured where the courses are set up so that students have to turn in things, every couple weeks, so they have to turn in their note cards, and then they've got another week and they have to turn in an outline, and then they have to turn in a rough draft. Whereas in college, literally they might get a syllabus that says, you've got a 20-page paper and it's due in 2 months, and that's it. And if you've got a student who waits till the last second, they're in for a very rude awakening. And so talking to them about how college courses can be different and what they need to do in terms of being proactive and trying to manage their time and manage their schedule, because the intensity really increases in college. You might be taking fewer classes, but there are huge amounts of reading, and again, taking on the responsibility for managing your schedule. It's a big deal, and they really need to have the skills to do that.
Exactly. A lot of students are used to a lot more hand-holding in high school, I'd say, for professors reminding them each week, this is due at this time and this is due at this time, to make sure you're doing your reading. There's much less of that in college. I mean, it depends on the professor, but in general, like Brie was saying, you'll receive a syllabus at the beginning of the year. And you'll be expected to know when these things are due and plan your own time, and this catches a lot of first years or freshmen by surprise. And so really encourage time management skills and encourage your child to plan out long-term for their assignments. Otherwise, it'll sneak up on them and they'll get caught up in everything else that's going on in college. And they'll turn in a weak paper that turns out to be worth 30% of their grade. And so a lot of students aren't used to that. But there are support structures in place to help you get the work done. There's lots of study groups that form. The library is a great place to meet people from your class. And so there's lots of other things you can do. You're not in it alone, even though it is a big step up academically.
Yep, absolutely. And knowing what the resources are, students should know that there's a writing center, that there are peer tutors, that the professor has office hours, and if you again, I keep using the word empowerment, but if you empower them with the resources that are going to be available to them in college and make sure that they have the confidence to step up and advocate for themselves and use those resources, they're going to be in much better shape.
Exactly. I'd say the students who do the best in college are the ones who are confident, the ones who are willing to go to a teacher, the ones who are willing to go to friends, the ones who don't just sort of dig themselves a deeper hole when they fall behind with their work. Those are the students who tend to do the best. So, excellent. All right. So we are into Know Your Resources, which is good. So if you're struggling with a paper, there's a writing center usually on every college campus. It's usually grad students who are there for a minimum wage or doing it for credit hours or that sort of thing. Usually grad students in English who are willing to help you write papers. And so they'll help you outline, they'll help you edit. And a lot of students have no idea that this exists. And so definitely research the resources available at the school to see what kind of help you can get, because you're not out there alone. And so there's some other support structures in place, advisors especially. And so you'll see most students are assigned an advisor their freshman year, but later when they pick their major, they're able to select their own professor to be their advisor within that major. In addition to this, they'll have residential advisors. Some places faculty will live close to campus. And so there's lots you can do. What would you suggest parents can do during orientation or students can do to try to seek out these support structures and make sure they know where they are?
Well, I think one of the most important things that I think a lot of parents kind of just assume well, this is what my parents did. I went to University of Michigan, and they literally dumped me out of the car, and I did my orientation, and they were on their way, and it was like, Brie who. And so a lot of parents kind of just assume, my son or daughter is going to get all this at orientation. They're going to know everything. Well, orientation is definitely a time to learn about resources and what they're supposed to do about their schedule and all that, but it's also a lot of fun, and you're meeting people, and you shouldn't, as parents, take for granted that your kid's just going to soak it all up like a sponge. And so parents should familiarize themselves with the resources at whatever school their kid's going to, and just kind of, give subliminal messages here or there, make sure when they talk to their child that they know, hey, remember that you've got a writing center, you've got a peer tutor here, you've got these workshops that are available through the counseling center, you've got the counseling center if you need to see someone for emotional reasons, whatever it is. So I think if parents, arm themselves with the knowledge of what's out there and they're in good communication with their kids, then I think it's going to be great. That's the way to do it.
Exactly. Yeah, and one more thing to add that's not here. I would say make sure your student knows where the student health service is, and so or the local hospital, that kind of thing. Just because not to scare anybody, but I mean a lot of students don't realize that they can get sort of free health care as a student through the university's student health system, and so a lot of them just don't know that that exists, and when they get sick, they just try to tough it out. But definitely know about these things. A lot of them are free, and so it's great to know about, and definitely take advantage of all the material they give out at orientation to know where these things are. So,
absolutely, and one other thing is that there are students who kind of, struggle with various learning issues, ADD, a math disability, whatever it is, and they know going into their college experience that they're going to need some special accommodations, and that, parents and students can apply for that when they apply for admission, and they can make sure to get the accommodations they need, and they should know, maybe they'll have a learning specialist that they can meet with, or maybe there's a special writing center or a special kind of tutoring program for them. And just parents should be aware that if their son or daughter does have, some kind of a special need for that, that colleges offer, additional levels of support for kids who need it.
Good, yes. And at Educational Connections, we offer a lot of tutoring for college students in specific classes, but also right now we get a lot of calls for over the summer, students who want to catch up in time management skills and organization skills. It's a good time if the student's willing to maybe bring in a tutor, and a third party can make all the difference. So good, so far so good. All right, so now we're on to social life, and this could obviously be its own whole webinar, but we'll just try to talk a little bit about some of the issues that a student will run into. And the first is dorm life, especially if they're able to live on campus their first year. This is a big part of their first circle of friends who they'll be going to meals with. They'll have residential advisors who guide them through everything to make sure that students are feeding themselves and know where to get things. But one thing you'll realize, at least for a first year going into college, you're really nervous going into it, and you think everyone else knows what they're doing. And then you get there and you realize that everyone else is in the same boat as you, that they're all kids that are your age who are from all over the country. And so that's sort of a relief for a lot of students. That's where they start to have some fun and get to meet some people. So dorm life will play a big role. And there's also lots of student clubs available. And so there's plenty to get involved in. Any kind of passion you can think of for a student, there's something to do. You can find another student who's interested in it. Usually there's a student club fair the first month of school. And usually every freshman, every first year attends it, because it's just a great way to meet people and find all these, niche clubs. I was at UVA. I graduated, I guess, recently, and there was a Bob Barker club. I mean, you could find anything. Just it'd be an anime club, a game developers club, really anything you could have any kind of interest in. Students are really thrilled to see that kind of thing. So that's another place that their social life will grow. Anything you'd like to add as far as dorm life?
Clubs, right, Colin?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, if there's not a club in existence, they're encouraged to start one.
Exactly, and the university tries to make it really easy. They provide funds for you to start things. So it's really a great way to get involved. Anything you'd like to say about dorm life that I didn't touch on?
No, I mean, I guess the one thing I would say is, it can be a big transition for some students and maybe not as much for others. I was an only child, so actually having a roommate was a big shock for me.
That's true.
And, sometimes things don't work out. And, for most schools that I'm aware of, they have this sort of eHarmony kind of setup where you go on and you plug in all this information about yourself, and they try to match you with somebody who's similar. So often it ends up being a great match, but not always. And so students should know that if it's not perfect, there are ways to kind of remedy the situation, and they can approach their resident advisors and try to make a switch. And so just kind of being aware that if it doesn't work out smoothly, there are, kind of ways around it and things that students can do.
Yes. I would also say don't be completely afraid if your student ends up having to have a random roommate for the first year. A lot of times it works out great. And so, for boys especially, boys seem to get along well. Even with a random person, they just sort of, coexist and, don't get in each other's way and that kind of thing. For girls, it can cause some drama occasionally. These are broad generalizations, obviously. But drama, in general, I've found, young women, or I should say, I suppose. But in my experience in general, just observing this, it seemed that about half the time with a random roommate, they ended up getting along great and became best friends. And so don't be afraid. It's a new situation regardless of whether or not there's a new roommate or not. So It could even be a good thing, so not something to fear over, I'd say at least. Okay. In addition to student clubs and dorm life, there's local activities within the town that the college is in that a lot of students will neglect or not even think about. There's places to volunteer. There's places where you can even find part-time jobs. A lot of times the town will rely on the college for income and for manpower for the workforce and that kind of thing. So don't worry about or don't steer away from looking around in the town to see if there's any clubs available outside of the school that the student might be interested in. So that's a lot of thing that I'd say first-year students neglect. So that's something. And then lastly, now obviously this is a bigger issue that we could spend more time on, but there is a lot of partying obviously in college. That's depending on the school you go to, you'll see a lot of underage drinking is a problem, in America. So you'll see this occasionally. The problem is you'll see a lot of students go overboard. They're sort of thrust into this new situation where they have no overseers at all, no parents. If the school has a large Greek life, they'll be able to get into a party and really, there's a lot of alcohol that's consumed, sort of unmonitored or even police occasionally won't be able to break it up or anything. And so it's just something to be aware of. In general, I'd say if your student's not much of a drinker in high school, you generally won't see it at all in college. You'll see a lot of what their social life is now is how it'll be mirrored in college. At least that's what I'd say. What would you say about the issue?
That's
obviously it's
one.
complicated.
Yeah, and I agree with you to some extent that again, you got to know your kid, and I think if you've got a responsible kid who takes care of themselves and lives kind of a healthy lifestyle, they might experiment here or there, but overall you can have faith that you've kind of laid the right foundation and they're going to be fine. But again, it can be a new world for these kids. They're out on their own. They don't have parents watching over their every step. And you see a lot of your peers doing things, and there can be peer pressure, maybe even more so than in college because, again, you don't have mom and dad right there, and you have all this freedom all of a sudden. So, again, I think it can be a really big adjustment. When I was in graduate school, I did all of my therapy work in college counseling centers. So I was doing therapy with college kids at DePaul University in Chicago and most recently at GW. And a lot of the kids who came into the counseling centers were freshmen who had trouble adjusting, and part of their difficulty was socially, and just the barrage of social stuff coming at them and the partying and the friend drama and, just trying to make sense of all of it and negotiate that while at the same time trying to do well in school. So it can be overwhelming for them.
Exactly, and the danger is that a student will go overboard. Most people who drop out of college, this seems sort of obvious, end up dropping out in their first year. They're overwhelmed with the workload, but mostly it's because of the social life aspects of it, that they sort of go overboard and aren't able to handle their other responsibilities. And so it's something to think about, and like Brie says, it's all about knowing your kid. And so there's only so much you can do about communication to a certain point. Colleges are very good now about communicating with students about this, about the dangers of over-drinking. They hand out blood alcohol content cards and that sort of thing. So this webinar isn't meant to scare anybody, but we just thought it should be something we exactly, although you never know. But the whole point of this is to just mention it so that you're aware that this will be a part of the social life for a lot of students. And so it's something good to know. It doesn't mean you have to hound them on Facebook and look for pictures all the time. But it comes down to open communication with your child. That's the key here to the most effect you can have really on how they'll treat their bodies and how they'll treat other people once they make it to college. So
definitely.
Yeah. Anything else you'd like to say on it?
No, I think that's good.
Good. All right. Yeah, I think we covered the main points. Excellent. So now we're on to extracurriculars. You'll have a lot of opportunities. We already talked about student clubs a little bit, but one thing is really encourage your student to explore the school facilities. There's lots of free pianos you can rent out, free guitars that you basically just rent out as a student from the music department. A lot of students just don't know about these things. There's usually if there's a media department at the school, there can be an entire DVD library that they're able to check out. It's essentially a free Blockbuster or a free Netflix that they can just check out for free if they have a student ID, turn it back in 2 weeks, that kind of thing. And there's places just to find other passionate people. So don't shy away from really exploring all of your school's facilities. There were some things as a student I remember that I discovered in my third year, and I was like, man, I wish I knew about this years before. So that's something to think about. Academic opportunities. I really wanted to talk about this because it's something that students don't really consider looking down the road. So if you're able to develop relationships with professors, they'll give you lab work, they'll give you research work to do, there's nothing but benefits for forming relationships with professors. There's even I had a lot of friends in college who would make extra money on the side participating in psychology studies. And so there's grad students who like to use undergrad students as sort of, hamsters or gerbils, I guess, for psych experiments. And so they're usually, harmless and painless. It's just some sort of, response sort of thing. But it's a good way to make extra cash. A lot of students took advantage of that, at least at UVA. And study abroad opportunities, finally. This is much better than your opportunities in high school. To study abroad for a semester, exchange programs with places in Spain. Every single person I knew who ended up studying abroad absolutely loved it. And so that enough should be a glowing review to to broaden your horizons, meet new people. You'll miss out on a little bit of what your friends have done for a year, but you come back with really some fantastic experiences. Do you have anything to say about study abroad programs in general or other academic opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, study abroad is becoming more and more popular. If you go on any college tour, your tour guide is going to talk about it and probably will have done a semester or is planning on doing a semester. So at some schools, it's actually mandatory. Goucher College, for example, which is right outside of Baltimore here, it's mandatory. So any Goucher student must go because they believe that strongly that it's such an important part of developing and becoming a global citizen and all that good stuff. And, there are also many universities that have campuses, their own campuses in foreign countries, which is actually pretty cool.
Excellent.
So you can pretty much go wherever, whenever. For a lot of schools, it doesn't have to be your junior year abroad. You can go as a freshman. You can go as a sophomore.
Exactly.
So it's a great opportunity. And not for everybody, but, it's definitely important to know that the opportunity's there.
Exactly, and it's a way to do it without spending a whole lot of money because there's a lot of aid available. So lastly here we have sports. I just added this in case there's a lot of students who are very athletic and think that high school is sort of their last chance to play. It's not entirely true. So even if they can't make a Division I team or a Division II team, there's plenty of intramurals. There's dorm leagues for them to get involved. And so you see a lot of high school players who are playing basketball and thinking, well, this is the last chance I'll get to play. But once they make it to college, they say, oh, wow, there's a whole, another 4 years at least of being able to play with other people on my level, and it ends up being a lot of fun. So don't shy away from that. Those are usually, a blast. So definitely look into that if your student's athletic. All right, so now we're on to what to do as a parent. And so I'll let Brie do most of the talking for this one, I suppose. So first we have two different models of parenting, neither of which really work. So can you explain to us helicopter parents and snowplow parents?
Okay, well, helicopter parents, I think that term is pretty much well incorporated into our lexicon. But, those are parents who understandably want to be very involved in their kids' lives and kind of know everything that's going on, and they sort of are there hovering
exactly
in circles at all times. And I think, kids tend to feel sort of micromanaged with helicopter parents, that their parents are just always in their business and wanting to know everything about what's going on. Snowplow parents are parents who kind of physically remove obstacles in their kids' way all the time. So if a student is running up against any kind of a problem, academic, social, whatever, the parents kind of come in and deal with it and push it out of the way so that the kid can sort of move forward. And I guess short term, there's a benefit to that, but long term, and this is what happens if you can envision a snowplow pushing a pile, ahead, at some point it becomes a huge insurmountable wall of snow that you can't get over. And really what parents are doing, not intentionally, is they're really doing a disservice to their kid because they're enabling the kid to kind of get by without having to take ownership of their lives, and they don't learn how to advocate for themselves and to handle problems. So I think it's really important now, if you do recognize yourself as a helicopter parent or a snowplow parent, to find a way to be involved with your student, with your son and daughter, to know, to let them know that you care about them and you're going to be there for them and you're going to be supportive, but you're not going to fix everything, you're not going to solve all their problems, and you're going to empower them to kind of take ownership of their lives so that when you send them to college and they are independent, they can handle stuff that comes their way.
Good, exactly.
Does that make sense?
Yes, perfectly. And so we'll see during this, obviously communication's a big deal for keeping lines of dialogue open with your child. But one thing here that I think a lot of people haven't thought about is parents have to adjust too. And so this is a big change, especially if they're moving on to, this will be the last child leaving off for college. What sort of adjustments should parents make, and how should they approach the situation if this will be a big change in their lives?
Yeah, no, I mean, there's some major developmental issues going on at this time during the transition to college. I mean, for kids, they're dealing with separation, becoming more independent but still feeling dependent on parents, forming their identities, becoming more intimate with peers. They're going through all this stuff. But simultaneously, parents are going through a separation process and a transition process, and it can be very emotional for them, especially if it's their only kid. For my parents, well, my parents were different. They, changed the locks and turned my room into a home gym and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know if they cared that I left.
Yeah.
But for a lot of parents, they're sad and they miss their kid, and it's hard for them. And so a lot of issues can come up for them, and it can be an emotional time. And it would be good to maybe talk to other parents and share experiences and realize that you're not alone. They even have they've got support groups for everything, but they have support groups for this kind of thing. And just to keep in touch with their child and kind of understand that things are changing, but that it's normal and it's a natural part of life. And the way things are going now, their kid might be back living with them for an extended period of time.
Yeah, actually, I don't want to throw on stats that I'm not absolutely sure of, I guess. But for my generation specifically, people graduating in the late 2000s, most moved back in with their parents, which is really frightening to think of, but can be a good thing depending on the situation. Sort of
totally.
a sign of how rough the job market is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
but I think parents just should be aware, just being mindful that that it can be an emotional time for them too, and not to be shocked if they've got feelings that are kind of new to them during this whole process.
Exactly. All right, so next up we have Know Your Child, and this has sort of been a theme throughout. Here we have some helicopter parents taking it to an extreme. So here's some questions to ask you, to ask yourself about your child, to know how they're going to do once they make the transition. So first, what are they comfortable with? And so how much initiative do they take? That's our second question. For are they self-starters when it comes to managing their own schedule? Are they comfortable getting from one place to another on their own? And even basics down here of do they take care of themselves, hygiene-wise, keeping a schedule, or even basics like laundry, shopping, cooking. These are the things that you actually can help to teach them and encourage before they head off. And so make sure that they're comfortable with, comfortable in their own skin, comfortable with their routine, so that when you send them off, they're not sort of, well, what do I do? I haven't eaten in a couple days, and so, not a situation you want. But well, let's see. So one thing I wanted to drive home here is college will not magically change how your child operates. Obviously, it's a new atmosphere for them, and you'll see a lot of developmental changes. But if your students sort of, poor at math, and all of a sudden they're in an upper-level math class in college, they're not just going to all of a sudden be good at knowing how to study and practice. And so these are things that you can try to embed into their routine and embed in how they approach academics beforehand, before they head off. So we'll keep moving here. Good. So here we're on to be aware of things that are natural changes, and Brie already touched on a lot of these. But these are some things to keep in mind, that these are just things that will naturally happen as they grow older and become this age as they're in college. So looking over the list briefly, is there anything you think we're missing, or anything you'd like to touch on as far as what to expect to naturally occur with your child at this age?
No, I mean, I think those are the things listed are kind of the big things that students are dealing with. And, there's a range. Some students are kind of further along than others, but for the most part, they're really kind of struggling with all this. And it's interesting, just the application process itself really is demanding a lot of these youngsters. I mean, you think about it, they're 16, 17 years old when they're filling out these applications, and they're asked to kind of select a major and think about what they want to do for the rest of their lives, and kind of prioritize their extracurricular activities and talk about why they enjoy doing what they're doing. I was actually very surprised, as I've been talking with students over the years, to find out that a lot of them, they love lacrosse, for example, but they don't know why. They can't. It's hard for them to articulate why they're passionate about what they're passionate about, why they do what they do, because they haven't had to really think about it. So they're trying to figure out who they are, and they're being asked all these questions, and they're having to make decisions, and they don't really know what they're doing, and that's totally okay. College can be the place to figure it out. And while they're trying to figure out who they are, again, they're separating from their parents. Parents have been their support network forever, and now all of a sudden they're not.
Yeah.
And they're there in some capacity, but it's not the same. And so they're kind of in this limbo phase. Am I totally independent? Well, no, but I'm not living at home anymore either. They're also, becoming intimate with peers in terms of friendships, in terms of romantic relationships. I guess, yeah, and leaving friends. I mean, this is closing a huge chapter of their lives. They're leaving friends that they've probably had since elementary school.
Exactly.
And it's a big deal. It's a very big deal to kind of leave them behind and move on. So they're really struggling with a lot, and a lot of it's good and exciting change, but it's change, and change by its nature is stressful. And so it can be a very stressful time.
Good. That's a great way to put it. Good. So these are just some things to be aware of that will naturally occur, and you can expect them just as they become this age. Especially striving for independence in general is a natural thing to see at this stage. Okay. So lastly, we have help with the transition. So there are some things you can do if it's the summer between high school and college, or if your student's a junior. Things you can do to help make them the transition into their new life at college. And what you can do to help. So you described to me some summer programs and what you would call bridge transition programs. What are these exactly, and how can they help with the transition?
Well, there's several different kinds of things, and parents might be familiar with this. If you look at colleges kind of all over the country, they often offer summer programs for, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where students can go and take courses on a college campus. So, for example, you can go to the University of Michigan, you can live in the dorm for a couple weeks and take, an intensive 2-week class on, whatever it is, philosophy. And it's great because students get exposed to a college campus, they get to live in a dorm, they get to take a class with a professor and kind of feel what it might like to be at college. I mean, that's really what it is. So that's a great kind of a thing to do. A bridge transition program, when I use that term, there are some students who, maybe aren't quite ready to handle the demands of college academically and maybe socially too. And some schools offer a bridge program where students can come early in the summer term and have their orientation, get connected with professors, take a couple classes before things really start in full force in the fall. And that can be a really helpful kind of intermediate step for a lot of students who maybe aren't totally ready yet. A lot of colleges also offer conditional admissions. So if a student's sort of borderline in terms of their grades and test scores, and a school's thinking, well, we think they've got potential to be successful, but we are not quite sure, so we just want them to prove themselves. Again, they can kind of come early and do a term, and they have to maintain a certain GPA, but they can kind of do this transition period to make sure that they can then matriculate fully in the fall, say. So those kinds of things, if you have a student and you're a little worried that maybe they're not ready, or you just kind of want to expose them to the environment, those can be great opportunities for them.
Great. And we'll wrap up shortly and open it up to some Q&A briefly. But one really good tip here that I wanted to talk about was how the application process itself can actually be very telling for how your student will do with the transition. So can you tell us a little bit more about that and what parents should look for during the whole process of searching for schools and applying?
No, definitely. So again, I mean, the application process is pretty intensive, and it requires a lot in terms of time and energy and thoughtfulness. I mean, students, like I said before, are asked to prioritize their extracurricular activities. They're asked to write a 500-word essay about who they are as people. They're asked to think about what they might want to study and why, and what their career goals are. So they're asked a lot of things, to think about a lot of things that maybe they haven't thought about. And so if your child's kind of like not really committing to the process, if they're very resistant, if they're not willing to sit down and try to think about these things, if they're kind of blowing off the work, because it is a lot of work to get the applications done, if they're just not willing to do it, you need to register that and maybe think, what does this say? I wonder if he or she maybe isn't ready to go. Because it can be a sign of that. If they're ready to go, they will take on the process and they will do what they need to do to get it done. And hey, I'm a college advisor, so people hire me to help, and there's nothing wrong with getting help. But I'm talking about the students who really just kind of won't do it. And if they can't get through the process, to me, it means that they might not be ready to go.
Exactly, and this sort of transitions into our last point here of what sort of options do you have if it doesn't work out? If it turns out that college just wasn't a good fit, or you thought they were ready but it turns out they weren't, what sort of recourses do they have?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and I've had it happen. I've had it happen during the application process where students couldn't get through it. And you know, we talk about, okay, let's have a plan B. We don't have to go to a four-year university at all, and we don't have to do it right now. So what else could we do? You know, students can start at a community college and take a couple classes while they work part-time. They can do a gap year, which is becoming very, very popular, and many colleges actually want to see students taking a gap year, which I call time out with a purpose, where students can work, they can do internships, they can travel, they can do community service. There are all kinds of amazing programs that students can do. Where
I wish I had done it.
I wish I had done it too. I wish I had done it too. And it doesn't have to be some fancy, expensive program. I have a lot of students who make their own gap year where they take an exercise class and then they, you know, help design T-shirts because they enjoy that, and then they take a class at a community college, and, you know, so you can kind of make up your own, or you could, you know, do a formal internship, or, you know, any number of these travel programs, whatever. But it really can help you just mature, you know, grow up for a year and take some time and be productive, and then, you know, if college is in your future, you'll come back to it. I think a lot of parents and students worry they'll lose the momentum, they'll never go back, and that rarely happens. And if it does happen, in my opinion, you've got a student who really maybe wasn't meant to go to college. It's not for everybody.
Exactly. So even if it's not a good fit, even if it turns out a four-year college isn't right now for your child, it's not the end of the world, and there are other options and other great paths forward that you can take. So
absolutely, and I've had many students, I work with many students who want to transfer, so they start at one school and for whatever reason it's not the right fit, it's not working out, and they can absolutely take some time off and do a gap year even once they've started college, or they can simply transfer to another school. That's always an option. Yeah,
that's always an option. It's one that not everybody considers. Excellent, good, so never the end of the world. Awesome, so that's all the material that we've wanted to cover. I want to thank Brie Jeweler, obviously, for being a wonderful co-presenter, and thank you for your expertise and your help with everything. So I'll go over our next, just the last two slides of just, you know, general material. While I'm doing that, look to the question box on the right side of your screen. There should be somewhere where it says questions, and feel free to type in there. We'll try to get to answer some questions just briefly before we run out of time here. We won't run forever, but one or two questions maybe. Feel free to type into that box, and I think I can see them, and I'll ask Brie, and we'll get you some feedback. So while you're doing that, our next webinar is Monday, June 4th. This one's already getting really popular. So try to register now before I think there is a limit of 100 or so slots. So take your time, go over to our website, ectutoring.com, and there's a tab that says Additional Services, and from there you'll click on Webinars. And it makes it really easy to RSVP. It's just a click away, and you know because you're here. You were able to register for this one. So the title is Avoid the Summer Learning Slides, Simple Solutions and Useful Tools. So that one's already getting really popular and has a lot of registrants, so try to grab your spot before it's too late. And that's all we have, so hopefully we'll get to some questions now, just one or two. Feel free to visit our website, ectutoring.com. We offer in-home tutoring for all subjects and all ages. And we really hope that you enjoyed the material that was presented here. And so I think it'll be useful, and we'll send out a video to everybody who attended and registered, so you'll have it. It'll also be posted up on our YouTube page, so that you can see it and come back and listen to us anytime. So, all right, let's get to some questions real briefly, just one or two. All right, so this question's for Brie. Let's see. If my student is used to a lot of support in high school and a lot of hand-holding, what should I expect in college, and is there anything I can do?
It's a good question, and it depends on the nature of support and why that support is in place. So again, I mean, I have a lot of students who have learning issues, and they need support to kind of put them on an even playing field. You know, they need extra time on tests, they need help from tutors. So if that's the case, if it's a legitimate need for the support because the student really would not thrive academically without it, then those supports absolutely need to continue in college, and it would be important, you know, if your child has a documented learning disability, for example, to submit that documentation, you know, after your child is admitted to the university, so that they can get those accommodations at the college level. If the student is capable of doing things for him or herself and just isn't doing it, and there's a lot of support and hand-holding that's more enabling in nature, if that makes sense, that's the kind of thing where you can get into some trouble because, you know, at college, it's not there as readily. You know, if parents are providing it because parents live in the house and, you know, they can really be on top of it, they're not going to be there. And then in the absence of that support, the kid's not going to know what to do. So again, I don't know the nature of the support we're talking about here, and it really depends on that.
Good. That's a good answer, though. All right, and one last question. I think this is a good one. Should my son get a job over the summer between high school and college?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, if you can find one.
Can never be,
that's what I'd say. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a job is wonderful for so many reasons. I mean, certainly making money and sense of responsibility and discipline and sticking to a schedule and answering to a boss and all that good stuff. You get great life skills from something like that. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's better than, traveling or doing community service or whatever, but if it's something of interest to, your child, absolutely, it's a great thing.
Good, and I would add, even if you can't find a job, make sure the student is staying active in some way. Academically is great, but volunteering, traveling, those are great suggestions for ways to make sure that your student isn't sort of, getting into a slump over the summer if he has nothing to do before heading to college. So, great. All right, that's all the time we have questions. That's all the questions we have time for. So I want to thank Brie. Thank you so much for joining us. It was really a pleasure, and I hope everybody enjoyed the material. And so thanks. We hope to have you again sometime.
Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, everybody. This will close the webinar. If you have any questions at all, feel free to contact me. I put my email on here. I'm Colin at ectutoring.com. And we hope you enjoyed it. So thanks so much for your time, and we hope to see you next time.